Welcome to CharityVillage Connects. I'm Mary Barrell. Today we're talking about the crucial need for nonprofits to embrace DEI as an essential and fundamental component of their leadership, operations, and workplace. Joining us is Josh Basile, a C4-5 quadriplegic, a disability rights advocate and lawyer. At the age of 18, Josh was paralyzed below the shoulders in an accident. Soon after, he formed a nonprofit to empower newly injured families and created the world's largest paralysis video mentoring network on spinalpedia.com. As a medical malpractice lawyer and disabilities rights advocate, Josh serves persons with disabilities both in the courtroom and through policy initiatives. As a community leader and change maker, Josh works to improve the quality of life for people with disabilities and break down existing barriers to access and inclusion. To improve web accessibility and usability, Josh joined accessiBe as the Community Relations Manager. Welcome, Josh.
It's great to be here today, Mary. Thank you for having me.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the advocacy work that you do and continue to this day?
So 18 years ago, when I was 18 years old, I was on a family vacation at the beach. I was in waist-high water. A wave picked me up and threw me over my boogie board and slammed me on my head. And that day I shattered my neck. I became paralyzed below my shoulders. I remember floating face down in the water and just hoping my friends would see me, and they did. They pulled me to shore, woke up 14 days later in a critical unit with a ventilator, helping me to breathe. So the only way I could communicate was with my eyes by blinking once for yes or twice for no. And when I did regain my voice, I made sure that every day, every word from that moment on counted. And that's the day I became an advocate for life.
I know that it's been really your North Star in terms of the direction of your entire work and your career as well. Can we start by setting the stage for this conversation? Can you give us your perspective on why nonprofits, but really all organizations, have to make accessibility a priority?
So yeah, both the business world of companies, corporations of all sizes, they have a very important role in how to shape the country, the voices, the people they invite in to be their workers and their employees. The more people, the more diversity, equity, inclusion, and disability that we include within the workforce, it reshapes the country. It reshapes the conversation. It allows companies to have a better opportunity to communicate with a broader customer base. All abilities, not just certain abilities that, have access to their website or their stores on 2 feet. So both the business world, but then the nonprofit world. The nonprofit world are the big change makers on the ground that are reshaping it for people with disabilities or vulnerable populations that need supports or different services that can just better the world and change the world. I love my nonprofits. They're the best. They do the work on the ground, the tough work on the ground to make the world a better place and to make a difference. So it's just so important that both the nonprofit and for-profit sector have the DEI and disability. A lot of times they just say diversity, equity, inclusion, but I love to say DEI and disability because it's an important piece of the puzzle.
No question. And we've seen a lot of attention on, issues around Black Lives Matter. We've certainly in Canada seen many issues related about Indigenous rights. And so I do think that while the events that occurred, global events, had a really positive effect in raising issues around diversity, equity, inclusion to greater attention to more people, we haven't heard quite as much about diversity and inclusion as it relates to people with disabilities. Can you talk a bit about what the pandemic's effect on highlighting the issues facing people with disabilities are?
Absolutely. So, before the pandemic, too often, unfortunately, many people with disabilities were stuck in their homes and did not, venture out as much as they could. And then the pandemic happened, and it happened even more. because we were trapped in our homes even more so. But with that being trapped, certain conversations, the world started to pay more attention to the fact that people with disabilities need access to the world around them, and that if it's not a physical storefront that's accessible, the internet needs to be accessible. And less than 3% of the internet meets WCAG guidelines, which govern kind of what accessibility is on the internet. So it's more and more people talked about it, and then it became more mainstream. More people were like, all right, what can we do about this? And that's why we started to hear more. But then also, a lot of times we didn't hear a lot about disability prior as much, because workers with disabilities are the most unemployed or underemployed population than any other group in the country. And that's starting to change. The numbers are going way, they're increasing more so than ever. I actually believe because of the pandemic, because remote work has been a viable option, more so than ever. And before, a lot of people didn't believe if you weren't, making it in because of a transportation barrier to work, or because you weren't in the office, you weren't working. And what we've seen is people can work at a high level with the right accommodations in place. And for people with disabilities, some people with disabilities, having the option to work from home is transformative. It's I'm a big believer of kind of more of a hybrid approach, because I think there's great value of saving time on your commute and putting more hours in through the comfortable walls of your home, but then also getting out into the office and meeting with clients, getting your hands dirty, your wheels dirty, whatever you want to call it, but like really getting into the thick of stuff within a business is important, in the communication, the team building. But whatever it might be, we're seeing different trends, and different opportunities are expanding for people with disabilities. And people with disabilities are natural problem solvers. They're an incredible worker. They problem solve better than most, because every day we're having to figure out how to navigate this world. So our brains are like kind of rewired, and any company that brings them in, it's just they're getting a unique perspective more so than any of the other employees. And from a brand loyalty standpoint, workers with disabilities, when they're welcomed and treated as family, they return again and again as repeat customers or as employees. They're there to work a long time. They're not looking for the next job just to make an extra, $5,000, $10,000. When loyalty is brought to them in a retention standpoint, every company wants to retain their employees. And workers with disabilities statistically stay as employees longer than any other group as well.
So what you're saying is it's such an interesting observation that during the pandemic, because of the nature of how the world became more remote as a consequence, that there was more remote working, more virtual solutions, that was actually an advantage for many people with disabilities, because somehow it kind of opened up the possibility of a different way of working that had previously been sort of practiced as a way of work, and was an opportunity. But I guess this kind of raises the questions of, you've mentioned the importance of accessibility on the internet. What kind of barriers are there on the internet or in navigating websites and the world virtually that people who aren't disabled may not understand? Can you describe some of those challenges?
Sure, absolutely. So whether you have a mobility disability, a visual disability, cognitive, whether you have epilepsy, there's so many different abilities that exist in this world today. 1 in 4 in the US for adults are considered to be living with some form of disability. And no matter what your abilities are, you actually experience and navigate a website differently. Some people with different disabilities and abilities use a screen reader to be able to visually like put out what text is on the page, what does it look like, doing descriptions. So they have reading software to make them know what is actually in front of them. And if you have a mobility disability, a lot of times you use voice dictation software. So as fast as you can speak and can type, but if a certain form is not there to take your voice dictation software, you can't type your name or your credit card information. I use an on-screen keyboard to navigate a page. I tab through different sections I go to the menus, I go to the drop-down menus. And if a website doesn't have accessibility built in, I can't access that, and I'm stuck on the home page. I can't go to the drop-down menu to get to the next page and beyond. Other things can happen. I love my shortcut keys, so I can jump from different parts of the page to different sections, menus, forms, you name it. I love being able to jump around the page using shortcuts, because every click matters for me, because my neck and mouth can get tired, and I use a cursor right here to control my mouse cursor. So, and then for people with epilepsy, if a certain web page uses certain types of tones of colors or uses videos or blinking lights, immediately those can trigger an epileptic event. So you want to be able to make sure that people not only have a safe experience on websites, but they also can use the website. They can navigate the website and get from point A to point Z and everything in between without, falling through the cracks or having to ask someone for help. Everybody deserves the ability to be able to navigate a page on their own with their own unique technology and abilities. And when you do be able to bring accessibility or usability to a web page, it's transformative, and it gives people the ability to have better experiences and options.
And do you know how many, do you have a sort of a ballpark percentage of how many websites or in North America, for example, might be accessible or have these tools available to them to make them more meeting the standards to make them more accessible to people with disabilities?
So less than 3% of the internet meets accessibility guidelines. That 3% is millions of websites, but that 97% is hundreds of millions of websites. So, yes, we have lots and lots of great websites and businesses and nonprofits that have said, we want to do something. We want to make our website accessible to all abilities. But then there's hundreds of millions of people that just don't even either know about it, or that it's an issue, or that they've dropped the ball. But it's now more or less being able to have the right conversations to teach the world that accessibility matters. And those are the conversations we need to have. And that's with the pandemic. With people with disabilities, we're having more conversations about disability, which is allowing us to kind of learn more and grow more and to be a part of it. So even with DEI, people and businesses have all these trainings on DEI, but unless you have the right conversations afterwards, unless you have the right exercises and apply it afterwards, it's just scratching the surface. So, right now what we're doing is we're having a great conversation. What matters next is what you as a nonprofit, what you as a for-profit are going to do something about it. And one of the best things I like to recommend is making sure that your the powers to be within the business, the C-level positions, the HR level positions, the decision makers really fully embrace DEI and disability and make sure that it's part of the DNA of your organization and the culture that you're trying to create, not only today, but tomorrow and the next day and into the future.
Now, this is sort of leading us into understanding your work with accessiBe, a kind of tool that has been created to make web access a better experience for people with disabilities, called accessiBe. Now, could you talk about your role there and how accessiBe actually works?
So yes, I joined in February of 2021 as the community relations manager. And I was brought in to make sure that we brought in the disability community of all voices, all abilities, to have a seat at the table within our journey of trying to make the world more accessible. And as a company that is just striving to always grow and be better, we know that it's so important to not do it alone, and that we need to create a small army of communities across the world to say, this is something that needs to be done. This is something that can be done. This is something that must be done. And so we've just been on a mission to bring more web accessibility to digital assets for both for-profits, for nonprofits, and to show kind of where they're at within their journey of what options they have. And we do have an incredible tool called the Access Widget. It's an AI-powered solution that you can put onto your website. It scans your website. It finds all the different places where there's accessibility barriers, and then kind of fills in the cracks. And it creates these profile systems for whether you have epilepsy, to turn on that profile on, stops all blinking lights, it tones down the colors. If you have a mobility disability, turning that one on, that profile, it allows your on-screen keyboard to work with the different menus, the drop-down menus, and all the different things that you need to better navigate using a keyboard. And it does the same with reading software. It creates a lot more accessibility and usability on a site that might not be built from scratch with accessibility in mind. So it's just a great option. And there's so many other different content, color, orientation adjustments that you can make with it. A lot of people are seeing them more often, where on the side of the screen, there's like a little accessibility icon or tool. You click on that. But the access widget from accessiBe is one of the most powerful in the world right now. And I love it. And whenever I use it, I feel like I've got superpowers and choice on how to navigate a site.
Well, recently, because of working with accessiBe, we've actually made Charity Village's website more accessible with the widget, and we're very proud to be doing that. And we're also very proud to be partnering with accessiBe to bring the widget to the nonprofit sector. I'd love for you to talk about that relationship with Charity Village and what nonprofits can gain from making their websites, which a lot of nonprofits don't have big budgets, but what the widget allows them to do that they may not otherwise be able to do unless they built a new website from scratch.
And that's the tough part, is accessibility needs to be built in from the beginning. Like, that's the best practice, right? It's like you build a home, and then once you're done building the home, if you try to make it accessible, it's going to cost 2-3 times more than it would have to have that elevator in there or that wheelchair accessible shower, you name it. So the best practice is always to build it from scratch. But we've talked about that there's hundreds of millions of websites that exist. And those website owners don't have the time, money, and resources to be able to do it manually to make their website accessible again. So being able to have options from a scalability level through technology, especially AI-powered solution like the Access widget, just creates a powerful option for websites and website owners to be able to bring more accessibility and usability to their site. And the founders at accessiBe recognize that nonprofits around the world are serving communities and that are vulnerable, that need help. And they actually decided for any nonprofit that is a disability-focused organization, that the Access widget is completely free for them. Which, it's so important. Especially, I know I have a disability, so I love the disability community a little bit more than I would before my injury. But it's just being able to tell nonprofits that are disability focused that we have their back. It means the world to me. And then even for other nonprofits around the world, being able to use a tool like Access widget, it is really a cost affordable option. It's so much cost more affordable than making a website done from a manual standpoint, which, yes, is the best practice. And if you can do it, if it's possible, always make your website accessible from the beginning. But even when you do make it accessible from the beginning, having a tool like the Access widget then brings it to the next level, because it gives you all these customization tools and options on then how to have the best experience for you. And a lot of people with disabilities have multiple disabilities. Like I am quadriplegic, paralyzed below my shoulders. But since being a little kid and in grade school, since the second grade, I've also have an ADHD diagnosis, and I have a reading disability. So I use a reading software, a screen reader on my websites as well, alongside using my on-screen keyboard and my voice dictation. So being able to have all three of those and have profiles that allow me to do that and customize it, it's for me, it's the future of being able to allow people to choose how they want to navigate a site on their own and with their own unique abilities.
I wonder now, as we finish our conversation, if you had any tips or strategies for individuals or organizations who want to become stronger allies or agents of change within their organizations for building a more inclusive, accessible world, especially online, for a larger community, including people with disabilities.
One of the best ways to start is go to accessiBe.com/accessscan, and you actually can put the URL of your website into that and click get an audit. And basically it does an audit report of your website, all the places that you're doing great and all the places you're falling short. And it does a comprehensive review, puts it into a PDF, and you can share that with your team and let them know where you're at and what you can do to make improvements. You can't really improve unless you know what you need to improve or what you need to advocate for. And the other thing is really making sure that your decision makers within the organization can really buy into the fact that diversity, equity, inclusion, and disability should be a part of your culture going forward. And the best time to do it is now. If you haven't done it yet, do it now, because you're delaying the inevitable. And the more that you do it now, the better you get, the better you get at it, the better you practice at it. DEI and disability, to me, is really a sport. The more you practice, the better you get, the more natural of a conversation you have. And the next thing you know, you're transforming your nonprofit, your business inside and out to include more people. And that can positively impact your bottom line and the people you serve. With 1 in 4 people in the U.S. With adults having a disability, like we're talking about in disposable income in 2020 alone, there's $1.28 trillion in disposable income. And that's just people with disabilities. And if you look at people with disabilities and their friends, their family, what we call the disability community, we're talking about $7.1 trillion in disposable income. Those numbers are big, and there's no reason why you don't want to include all new customers to be a part of your journey and to be able to have them welcomed and experienced and to explore every part of your website so they can benefit from it. And if you don't have accessibility built into your website, a lot of times people with disabilities can't even apply for jobs within your organization. They can't learn about your organization and to know why they want to be a part of it with you. So the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the time to start is now.
Well said, Josh. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your story, and your advice. And thanks to our audience.
Thank you, Mary.